There we go. Okay, good to see you all. Hopefully we'll have the remaining 2 or 3 pop in here soon. Let's have a word of prayer, and I'll introduce our speaker, and we'll give him the full time. Father, we are grateful for the beautiful day you've given us, for the little bit warmer weather, for the chance to be here together. And we thank you for Dr. King and for his years of ministry and experience and for his investment in us today. I pray that you bless this time, help us to learn much and be inspired for the various ministry tasks that you have called us to do. So we ask for your help, for your glory, in Christ's name. Amen. All right, we are privileged today to have Dr. Joe King, who taught here for many years. I had this whole introduction I was going to give, but I don't want to give any spoilers because the entirety of Dr. King's talk is going to be to share a little bit of his journey with us and for us to benefit from his years of ministry and experience, both in the local church and the seminary. And so we are delighted to have one of our own here with us today. And let's welcome Dr. King.
Thank you very much. I've gone by A. Joseph all my life because no one knew the first name. So I put it on the board, and you can see that it's related to a seminary because it comes from the Old Testament. And we've researched it a couple of times. I think there may be 40 or 50 of them in the United States. And the only one I really found was a Catholic priest in Mexico with the name. So it comes from the Old Testament. An easy way of putting it was that he was King Solomon's public works director. Dr. Scott says that that's a nice way to put it. I come to talk to you just a little bit about my journey, and it starts with that because my mother obviously had something in mind when she gave me that name. Because Adoniram Judson was a missionary to Burma. He was the first missionary who started out as a Congregationalist, and with William Carey on the way across the ocean, they studied the scripture and decided that baptism by immersion was the correct biblical stance, and so they became Baptists. Now, Adoniram Judson stayed there, and William Carey came home to raise money, and he became famous. Adoniram Judson is only known in Burma, but every church, every city has a town, or a church named Adoniram Judson Baptist Church. So that's not what I started out to do, but I grew up in the home of a Baptist pastor. I became a Christian very early, and it was very profound. It touched my life greatly. We were in a musical community. Probably the thing that turned my life toward music was in 1950, I went to the National Music Camp in Interlochen, Michigan. 6 weeks of intense training, and it just said, you're either going to be a musician or you're not. So I went to Baylor to be a music educator, a band director. That was my goal. And I was in ROTC. And at the end of my junior year, after his camp in ROTC, I went back to my home in Oklahoma. There were about 3 or 4 weeks before school started, and they had Fall Street Baptist Assembly, which is a very special place for me because I spent my early life going there. And on the very last night of the last service, the Lord touched my life again in a profound way that I still identify. And it simply said this, and people who talked to me at that time said, it's like you spoke to the man. Because I did hear profoundly what God wanted me to do. And that was to go and resign my position at Baylor and transfer to Oklahoma Baptist University, my hometown, my home state, and follow the roots of the people that I recognized, who were Warren Angel. You may or may not recognize that name. He was for 50 years was the dean and conductor of the Bicycle League Club in Oklahoma Baptist University. There was Gene Bartley, who was the state music secretary. There was William J. Reynolds. You may recognize that name as a hymnist around here. His picture's upstairs. And then there's R. Paul Green. They were a quartet. There was a choir of 500 in that particular occasion. I was impressed beyond words with choir. I knew I had to go. I followed. Then I ended up coming here. Paul Green was my teacher here. Warren Angel was my mentor. Bill Reynolds was the one who kept me there. Gene Bartlett was the first one to take me for training to Ridgecrest Baptist Assembly. So those people had great intent. When I came to Southwestern as a student, there was Robert Burton, there was James McKinney, very, very influential people. Cecil Roper was on the faculty, and Mrs. Roper was my accompanist at University Baptist. When I graduated in '60, automatically, I did not know how to describe this except it was available. I went to University Baptist as their first full-time minister of music. And I served there until '76. That was a very special time. So 16 years, we had a youth choir. In about 63 or 4, James Harris, our pastor, was named the president of the Texas Baptist Convention. He was going to speak, and they said, "We want your choir to sing for him, back him up." So I said to the youth choir, "You know, we're going to do this, and it's going to be really great. Let's consider doing 2 rehearsals, like Wednesday and Sunday, to be sure that we're prepared." Well, that was October, and I said, when we got through with October, that was great. Now we need to do a Christmas music. Let's keep our double rehearsals going. Then when that was over, well, it's going to be time for tour, so we kept on going. We never went away from it, and it continued for more than 10 years after I left. They sang for an early service every Sunday, and it was a very, very meaningful time. Young lady here, mother was in one of those choirs. So that has all connections. That was a really exciting time. I can't tell you how influential choirs were in my life, because I went to OBU because of choirs and because of a quartet. I came to Southwestern because of choirs, and everything that I did centered around choirs. Now, we had children's choirs, and that was one of the things that I cherish very, very much, and I fear we've lost or we are losing children's choirs, because that was a big part of our church's activity. We had youth choirs. I had a middle school choir and a high school choir. And then we had an adult choir. These were all very, very significant times. And I felt like that my ministry really was a choral ministry more than anything else. That was that period of time. Now, you all come up with a different era, and you have to find your own way to make this all fit. But I came prepared to say choirs are still very relevant. Very, very relevant. And I hope that children's choirs will become very relevant, because after World War II, Mabel Boyer and Ruth Nininger were 2 young women who said, Baptist churches don't have any singers. And so they said, the way we're going to get there is to start children's choirs. They promoted children's choirs. They did workshops for children's choirs. They developed a whole spectrum of children's choirs in all the churches. Now, part of that had to do with pastors. The pastors loved to support the music ministry. And they came, my pastor at university, he said, whatever you need, we're going to have. And so that was, without his support, I could not have done what I did. So that was the choirs, the tours. We took a tour almost every summer. And that would be California, New York, Florida. We did major tours all over the country. We stayed in homes. That's not possible these days. But there are ways to do tours. And so that was a big thing that we did. We did major works with orchestra. I was there at university when we built the sanctuary. You can go find my footprints over there, because the height of the risers or something that I dedicated my life to getting to happen. And so those are wonderful, wonderful times. So as I go along, you can ask questions if you have something that you want to ask. Now, having done that, I was there from 60 to 76 as minister of music full-time, and that was a wonderful time. In 1974, I went to Ridgecrest to teach a class on choral leadership. Now, I just went upstairs. I did an article for the Church Musician, And I said, Jason, can we trace this down? And we did. This was the summer of 1974 that I presented this class to the musicians at Ridgecrest. When I came back, I'd been pecking away at a doctorate part-time along the way. And I had gotten things done. Had a student. Do you still do tutoring? Do you still have tutors with your conducting classes, your videos? Well, we had a tutor and a student and the videos of their classes performance. And so we worked with that student 1 hour a week. I was one of the first ones to be a tutor because of where I was in the doctoral program. And this student, James Dance, was the minister of music at Gamble Street. And he came and he became one of my tutees. And after a few weeks, he went to Dr. Burton and said, I want you to know that this guy's teaching me very well. I don't know, that's all I can say. And so when it came in summer of 74, I taught this class at Ridgecrest at the beginning of school, Friday before school started. McKinney called me up and said, we've got so many new students, we need to divide our conducting classes. Can you teach 2 classes starting Tuesday? So I said, absolutely. I didn't even ask my pastor. I said, let's go. And my pastor said, great, go for it. So that was my privilege of doing that. I'd like to back up. So that just got me started. So I taught 2 years adjunct, became full faculty 2 years later. Let me back up just a little bit. When I went to church in 60, my wife was a singer, and she was more than just a singer. As a freshman in college, she sang the Mozart Requiem with a voice teacher, 2 voice teachers, and a master's student from Oklahoma University. She was a freshman. So she was showing me that. So, and she said, when I graduated at UBC, she said, I'm going to take my master's at TCU. So she started and had another baby, and 5 years later, she was ready to graduate. That spring, Joanne Shelton, who was the voice teacher here for soprano, called her and said on Thursday, she says, we're doing Beethoven Mount of Olives on Tuesday. I have no voice, get ready. So she sang Beethoven Mount of Olives from Thursday to Tuesday. Then that spring, she did a duet recital with Charles Williamson, the baritone of the faculty, as a faculty recital of Elijah, soprano and baritone. That same spring, McKinney attended her honors recital at TCU, in which she sang with the TCU orchestra. The week before school started, Joanne Shelton resigned. So McKinney came to Sue and said, we need you to come on the faculty for an adjunct, 1 year. She taught 34 years. As the soprano did Messiah many, many times. So we ended up, by circumstances, of both being on the faculty. It was really a special treat. Now, I've told you my story a little bit. My call came really was when I changed from Baylor to OBU. That's when I was profoundly touched. And in my classes here, I asked students to write something about your calling. What is your journey? What about your calling? Can you specifically identify anything? And I'm sure that most of you can. And they really came up with some good descriptions. I enjoyed reading them very much. So, but those calls are what keep you in the traces when the going gets tough. Because there are times when it does get tough. And so you have to keep on going very much so. All right, so that was right. So my conducting, I ended up conducting I started the handbell choir here. That was the first thing I did because I happened to have a handbell choir at my church. And so I went to one of the ladies and said, we need a handbell choir here at Southwestern. Could you donate the handbells? Oh, sure. So I was the one responsible for the handbell choirs. I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. I turned that over to somebody else. And we didn't have a wind ensemble, but we had some really fine players. So I started the wind ensemble. That was my inauguration of getting going. And I got that going after 5 or, and then I did that for, I don't remember, from 75 or 6 until, until 1990. And in 1990, I became director of Southwestern Singers. And so I did Southwestern Singers from 90 until 2005. And so that was, did a tour every year. If I'd have known that I could get by without touring, I probably would have done another year or two. But anyway, that because our seminary became divided. The churches began to move away from the seminary, and the people that I knew out there said, we don't want anything to do with Southwestern. Now, I'm happy to say that as of this fall, things are changed. Things have changed drastically. And I think that things are going to get better and better because of the new leadership here at Southwestern. Now, I said that, you could say, shame on you, if you want to, but that is my feeling very much so. So it's going to go much better. And Southwestern Singers, I do not know anything about what's going on. After I taught choral diction for 3 or 4 years after I retired, they said, hey, you're a member of the wrong church, so you can't teach anymore. So I haven't been back on campus much. I came this fall, and I've come to this class. So I don't really know what's going on here. I'm grateful for that. We have new leadership, and I have great appreciation for your faculty. I've known several of them, and I really do appreciate what they have to offer. Now, questions. Any questions that you might come up with? This article, which I wrote, which just during this period of time, it was a culmination of a period of time in my life. I'm sure you'll have some of these along the way. But I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would read books. They were self-help books, if you want to say it that way. Because I was so insecure about some things about my life that really I needed some help. So the first one in here says, develops an understanding of himself and others. And that was Maxwell Maltz Psycho-Cybernetics was a pocket book that helped me to understand more about myself. Then the next one was the art and skill of getting along with people. That was, in other words, Duval. Then develops the ability to have smooth personal-to-person relationships. Dale Carnegie, how to win friends and get along with people. And Donald Laird, the technique of handling people. Develops a genuine enthusiasm for his work. Norman Vincent Peale, it's enthusiasm makes the difference. The other step in my life is that every Monday I send my 6 grandkids Monday morning posses out of Norman Vincent Peale stuff. They've really come to appreciate that. Would you appreciate your granddad did that? I don't know. I'm still going to do it anyway. All right. Then the 5 great rules of selling. Develops the ability to inspire people. The 5 great rules of selling. The quick and easy way to effective speaking. Well, that was another one of Dale Carnegie's books. In that insecurity, I took a Dale Carnegie course. You may not know that, but there is a course still going on out there called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's Dale Carnegie. And at the time, it cost me $125 to take the class. My wife said, what are you doing? $125, we can't afford that. But it made an impact on my life, a big impact, because now I can't write out and speak. I have to just speak. As somebody's read. Then the magic of believing, the magic of thinking big, applied imagination, the techniques of delegating, executive guide to handling people, practical business psychology, fine arts of public worship, develops the grasp materials of the choral organization and administration. Then these are different books about choral organization, conducting choral music, choir directing, handbook of singing. Now, if you want to know where to get this, you have to go ask Jason. Because I went up to I said, Jason, I wrote an article back in some time. And he came up with it in about 15 minutes, printed out. So you can get it if you want, that's fine. Choral techniques and interpretation, and then Harry Robert Wilson, the artistic choral singing. So those are top books that I have read in the middle of the night, and did a short survey, and so they fit together. That's that late when I did that in '74. It was a culmination of a period of life, and I went on to teaching here at Southwestern from there. All right, how are we doing?
Can you kind of describe what things were like here in the 80s and 90s? All of us probably heard stories about the golden age and hundreds of students walking around Cowden Hall and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
what was it like?
I'd love to do that. Well, first of all, my joining the faculty is an indication of what was going on, because we were not expecting that kind of enrollment. But we had over 100 new students that semester, in fall semester. Now that's not the total number of enrollment. The enrollment was like 300, but this was 100 new students. Just in music. See, so that give you some idea of what happened at that particular time. It was really sort of the golden age. All the choirs, people were coming, outstanding singers. I mean, we had really fine student singers, and we had 7 voice teachers, just to keep them going. There were actually 3 of us on the faculty teaching and conducting. So that was really a very special time. The other thing I want to point out is that we did not have the music library. Take that building off, that was a parking lot out there. And so we had this building, and the library, the music library, was down there in the suite at the end of this hallway. When I came as a student, it was over here in 50. That was the music library. It got moved down there, and so that became the music library. So that gives you some idea of what we were crowded in these rooms. I mean, we were teaching classes from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then some night classes even.
Where was your first office?
My first office, well, I started out down here at the end of this office in the piano teacher or voice teacher's office in the corner, because I was substituting for that person who was on leave. You see, then the next, well, no, my first office was one of these, maybe this little office right here, which is the maintenance room now, yeah. But those are fine. Then I got to move up there. I got to be in Dr. Burton's office one year when he was on leave. I had an office downstairs in one of the rooms across from this faculty lounge, the skip in there. And then my last from 1990 was the year that Dr. Burton retired, and so I moved into his office where Chuck Lewis is now. So that was my office. But the main thing is we were just crowded in here, and it was fun. I mean, the hallway was crowded, and we had lots of fellowship and lots of fun, and it was a delightful place to be. And it really didn't start down. Well, that lasted, well, from 74. Let's go from 74 to like in the mid 80s up into the late 80s. And then when we built the library, Mrs. Bold, this is another important story. Mrs. Bold was an organ teacher, a student here in her young years. She married a person who was wealthy and successful, and I've forgotten his first name, but he gave buildings to the medical school in Tennessee. And so when he died, Mrs. Bold said, "Okay, he had his fund. Now I'm going to go do my fund." So she came to Southwestern as a lady in her late 70s. She said, "I worked on music before as an organist. I want to do conducting." Now, she had to pay tutors to get her through her classes, but she took all the classes and she got through the classes with successful scores. She wrote her paper and she conducted a master's choral conducting project. She came and says, I want my money to go to faculty. And she says, I want it to go to students. And there was one student who was visually very challenged. Her eye had been taken out with cancer. She could barely find her way, but she was a faithful student. Mrs. Bold wanted to finance her whole life by having her make her the copy specialist for the library. She was very imaginative of what she was going to do. Well, Mrs. McKinney, who was on the faculty as a piano teacher, befriended her in many special ways, and ultimately then she gave the money to build the music library. And you see her picture out there in the hallway in her conducting robe and and her Messiah. That's her, and she was determined that she was going to do that. And so that's what she lived across the street. She bought one of those little houses. She had it remodeled. It's still being used by faculty and people. So that was a very important job. Now the three persons that were honored were Burton, McKinney, and Al Travis, because this was a conducting person, and then the McKinney she loved, and then Al Travis, who was the organ professor. I do not know what happened to that money, but at one time there was enough money in each of those chairs to support the faculty salary. That's not possible now, and so consequently you don't have an organ professor. And I don't know what else to say about that. But I do know that it was not handled in a very good way. Now, other questions? What else?
Did you have any relationship with B.B. McKinney?
B.B. McKinney? Yes. All right. B.B. McKinney was the song leader at Falls Creek when I was a boy. Falls Creek is the Baptist assembly that I mentioned in Oklahoma. So my father was a pastor. He loved Falls Creek. It was the largest tent city in the world because they were, and I remember as a boy putting an outhouse on the back of a trailer and hauling it down the highway from northern Oklahoma to southern Oklahoma and putting it in place at Falls Creek. Now that was not something I really cherished, but I was embarrassed by as a small boy. But B.B. McKinney was the song leader at those assemblies in my boyhood years. Now he was an uncle of James McKinney, and so that was the connection. But B.B. McKinney was a cigar-smoking, singing evangelist. He was on the faculty here for a while, but the president, L.R. Scarborough, called him in and said, "You know what? We've got to reduce our faculty size. And I.E. Reynolds is the dean, and he can't do it, but you can go out and make your way as a revival song leader, so I'm letting you go." So those are the stories that I know about B.B. McKinney. But thank you for that question. All right.
Excuse me. Whenever I talked with my mom about like what it was like, and whenever you would teach music to the choir, she would mention that you would usually teach them how to do diction. I know that diction is important in a choir, but how did you go about teaching the choir how to sing properly, I guess, with different songs?
Well, when you're a choral person and you've got a bunch of kids that don't know how to sing, you got to start. Okay, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this. But I developed vocal exercises, which we started rehearsal with every rehearsal, and you may have done this in a high school choir. I did it with the youth choir, and they were successful in learning to sing with wonderful tone, in tune, and so that was that. Now, as far as teaching, at one time we had children's choirs. We had preschool choir, we had first, second, third grade choir, we had fourth through sixth grade choir, we had 7th, 8th, 9th grade choir, and the ninth graders could sing in the high school choir, but they had to sing in the middle school choir, so they had to do double duty. And so that's the way that I kept them motivated and kept them going. And so as far as now, I had public school music teachers teaching every one of those choirs. So it wasn't just people who were having to teach them how to sing. They knew how to teach them how to read, how to sing properly, and the good things. So they came along very, very well. And my 4th, 5th, and 6th grade choir was outstanding. And we would have choir festivals in which Travis Avenue would have an 80-voice children's choir. The university would have 50 or 60-voice children's choir. And we were judged very, very critically as to how well they did. I mean, what their tone was like, how their discipline, everything about it. We had these festivals. That was just a part of the organization that we had here. It was really, it's kind of hard to describe, but let me try. In that day, up until, I don't know, it was late 80s or early 80s, when the former president of this institution and another man in Houston decided that the Southern Baptist Convention was becoming too liberal. And we had to go back to fundamentalist tactics. That was the destruction of this plan. We had a Sunday school board provided literature for all Sunday school classes. Every age group had a Sunday school lesson. You probably had it when you were growing up, those lessons. And the money that the churches paid to the Sunday school board then went back into the promotion of Sunday school and church music. So the state of Texas had 3 persons on their staff in church music and partially supported by the literature that the churches bought for Sunday school and church music. The church musician, for example. So this was, and then we had Ridgecrest and Glorieta. Ridgecrest in North Carolina, Glorieta, New Mexico, where we would take 3,000 of our leaders to various schools, to various choirs, as many as we could get together, and our churches would support them and take them to Glorieta, and they would get inspiration and training on how to do better children's choir work, or better youth choir work, or they would sing in the oratorio choir. So it's inspirational par excellence. Now that has gone away. It's no longer going to come back. I do not know what you're going to do to replace it, but that's just the way it is. Because Glorieta was put together as a camp, a summer camp, and when they got ready to try to sell it, no, they said you can't sell it until you bring it up to code. If you know what building codes are. Well, it was going to cost $20 million to bring it up to code. And they said, we can't afford that, so they just gave it away. They gave it to another Christian organization, said, take it, do with it what you can. So it's still there, still functioning as a ministry, but it's no longer doing what it was intended to do. Ridgecrest is still there, but not, it's just a shadow of what it once was in terms of effectiveness. Okay, good question though, thank you. Any other questions?
So what was the philosophy of church music?
What was the what?
The philosophy of church music.
Philosophy of church music?
Yeah.
I don't know whether I can put that in words or not. Well, certainly it was to provide worship that was stately, that involved hymns that were structured in an order. We had praise, we had meditation, we had sermons, and then we had an invitation. And it was very structured in terms of schedule. We sang strictly out of the hymnal. We sang all together hymns. And that's where I am now. I'm in a church because of that, because we have a choir that sings effectively with training and with that. So I don't know that I ever developed a real philosophy of church music that I could put out and say, but that is the structure that I use. You're going to shoot me for saying that. But you're doing a much better job, because when Bruce Leafblad came on the faculty as a result of our workshops that we had, he was the one who began to really pound on philosophy of church music, the philosophy of worship. And his philosophy of worship came out of Isaiah 6. And you know what? I've never heard him make a presentation that wasn't out of Isaiah 6. It was always different, but it was always the same. So that as far as so if I have a philosophy, it comes out of there, but it's because of him. But he never speaks anywhere that I know about without that being his basis. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. If I'm not asking too much questions. Now let me ask again. In your time, in your days, how did you handle the charismatic and the Pentecostal influences in the Baptist church?
Pentecostal influences?
Yeah.
Well, in our church, we didn't have it. Now, let me just say an interesting story. We were in Alaska this summer on a tour, on a cruise, and we sat down, we were on a train, and this lady got on the train, and she said, who are you? Where are you from? Oh, I mean, she was just asking questions like that. And in less than 5 minutes, she had a full interview, and she said, well, you were from Fort Worth. What do you do? Well, we taught church music. Oh, what church? Well, Baptist. Oh, you mean the Holy Rollers? I said, not us. Well, that's what the Baptists do up here. And the Mormons, we just have an organ and a choir. You see, so that was the concept of Baptists up there. So it has gathered stuff. Now, another one of my presentations, just so you'll know that I also had an offshoot that I'm not proud of, but my presentation for chapel, I was chosen to insist that I have to speak in chapel. So I developed this instrumental music in the church. And so I presented it as a positive thing, that the instruments could be effective leaders in church. It's taken a whole different spin since then. See, so in this, it's all become guitars and, all of that. Maybe you'd have 3 or 4 violins, maybe you'd have a trumpet or two. It just kind of threw it. But back in the 30s, Broadman Hymnal had an orchestral version of the books. They had, this is for the trumpet. It was all transposed out, and they could play 2 parts of that. The trombones could play 2 parts. The horns had a part, and all the instruments were there. So there were churches that had full orchestra in the 30s, but they were not the Pentecostal kind. They were classical kind of orchestras, and they really attract some in. All right, now what I wanted to say in this, I want you to know about something that I found called Discovering Worship. It's a blog. Are you familiar with that? Well, I just went in and stole something.
Careful.
Yeah. Here, would you pass these around? Yeah. And then you should know about this if you don't. But these, I got it on Facebook. It came up on my Facebook, and all of a sudden there was something there. I thought, hey, this is really critical, and I need to be able to pass it around. All right, now looking at the blue one, I think this is a very well stated statement about why choirs are important. So if we look at the second page, we look at the blue one, second page, choirs are important because the Bible tells me so. See, it talks about 54 of the songs are addressed to the choir director. Temple of Jerusalem first dedicated, then again dedicated with Nehemiah rebuilt choir. Choirs are prominent. The Second Chronicle tells us that it was the choir and orchestra that delivered the worship so powerfully that the glory of God fell on those assembled in the temple. Secondly, choirs still fit the cultural context of some communities. It didn't say all, but it does. Now, choirs are a wonderful training ground for worship leadership. I refer that to the children's choirs and to the youth choirs and adults, because the leaders that are coming come from that generation. Choirs create a dynamic for congregation participation and unity. Do your congregations sing? I mean, some congregations really do, and when they do, it's significant. it's powerful. And the one thing that we don't have now, which I'm glad, but we had Sunday night services. And I mean, they would raise the roof in Sunday night services because we were singing gospel songs and hymns. So it had morning hymns and evening hymns. And there was a difference between that, but they sang. It was a great training ground. They sang a lot. Then it creates a dynamic for discipleship and missions of your community. And that's what the tours all became, mission opportunities. We would do mission work, and we would sing in nursing homes, we would sing concerts in the churches, and we would travel. So it was all good. And then, well, where can we find the choir director? Well. Say that they're not available. So that covers that. Now look at the other one, because I'm just trying to, you can study it, look at it. This one was written by Vince Wilcox. Vince Wilcox is in charge of discovering worship. And the way it came up to me on a Facebook, but http://blog.discoveringworship.com. I think you can find it, but you Google it no other way. But this one is a little bit different in its approach, but it says the same thing. First of all, it says that the choirs are biblical. So he talks about the same thing that we have the other one. Then he talks about choirs that celebrate the human voice. And I think this is important because people need to learn to sing with a good voice. And if you find your range, in fact, I just saw last night, if you have a speaking voice and you want to be heard over a long time, find your pitch and generate your pitch. Whatever it is, low or high, whatever your pitch is, if you stay with it, you can become heard all over. Now, in my old age, this is probably my closest pitch, but it's changed. See, you gotta remember, I came here as a student in 1958. Your parents were in born then. Okay.
My dad was one.
One. Okay, so there you are. I have my birthday is next Monday. I'll be 87.
What?
So anyway, the Lord's been good to me and to my wife. When she was 42, she had a heart attack. It was a great blessing because when she recovered, we started walking. We walked almost 3 miles most every day for the last 40 years. When I retired, I said I'm going to go to the rack. So, except when I'm tied down with HR Block, I go to the rack 3 times a week. And I've been pretty faithful to that. It has paid off big time. Big time. Okay, human voice. Choirs can inspire you. I'll tell you the next one. I'll tell you that. Then you see choirs can be redemptive communities. Very much so. We have a great community. We care for one another, and we also are blessed by people. And the choirs make us work together. Isn't that true? You can't do it if you don't have. And then in closing, he just goes on. This is my case. These are excellent articles, and these are things that you might look at. Now, when I retired in 2005, one more step in my journey. When you retire, you have to decide what you're going to do, because you can't just sit around and do nothing. So as we were driving down the highway, I saw a billboard, full billboard, H&R Block tax course. I've never seen one since or before, but it just jumped out at me. So I said, I'm going to take that tax course so I know how to do my taxes. And so now I'm in my 15th year preparing taxes for H&R Block. So it's an interesting, but people say, how did you get into it? It's a God thing. I mean, it's not something that I enjoy doing, but I would have never gotten there if that billboard hadn't bought me. And then I talked to another, one of my fellow pros. He'd just gone to see the Ark. You go back to the Ark every year. Yeah. He'd just gone to see the Ark, and he came back and he said, you know what? I went through the Ark and they had signs and scriptures and all these things, and it says, he said there were 2 or 3 of those scriptures that jumped out at me. He said, no one else saw them, I saw them. And they spoke to me and said, this is something I need to resolve in my life. So there are little things that do happen every step of your way that can be guided. And you need this, Max Brennan is the pastor of the Methodist Church in Arlington. He is right now writing and teaching a book he has written called Discovering God. And his thesis is there are people that have had special experiences with God. And he is trying to describe those experiences. And so if I had anything to say, this is what you're looking for. Pray about it. What is your purpose? What is your experience? And if you have one, notate it, write it down, and at least be able to talk about it. Because you see, I don't have to talk about it, and I've been blessed beyond words. Okay, any other questions? I know the classics are here to go over, so I thank you so much for letting me be here. It's the only, after they said I couldn't teach diction any longer, it's the first time I've been back.
Wow.
So thank you all very much. Oh, very good. All right. Yeah, Prince, you want to give these two?
Yeah, we can keep them around, sure.
Maybe my article, the other article is in October of 1974.
So that's in the library.
It's in the library. Jason Reynolds can help you if you need it. I said, well, no, one copy's enough.